I'd like to call the meeting of the University City Council to order at 6:31 on September 10th, 2018. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Clay.
Present.
Councilmember McMahon.
Here.
Councilmember Hales.
Here.
Councilmember Cusick.
Here.
Councilmember Smotherson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Carr.
Here. Is there any change to the agenda? Councilmember Cusick?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Erin Ginsburg will not be present this evening for her swearing in. She had a family emergency, and I believe she will have contacted Ms. Reese to schedule that at a later date. Thank you.
So is there a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of the swearing in of Ms. Ginsburg? Councilmember Smotherson, second. Councilmember Hales. And any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda has been approved. Proclamations, and we have 3 this evening. So the first is September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness. Whereas September is known around the United States as National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month and is intended to help promote awareness surrounding each of the suicide prevention resources available to us and our community. The simple goal is to learn how to help those around us and how to talk about suicide without increasing the risk of harm. And whereas suicidal thoughts can affect anyone regardless of age, gender identity, race, orientation, income level, religion, or background. And whereas, according to the Center for Disease Control, each year more than 41,000 people die by suicide. And whereas suicide is the 10th leading cause of death among adults in the U.S. and the 2nd leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 24. And whereas University City, Missouri is no different than any other community in the country, but chooses to publicly state and place our full support behind local educators, mental health professionals, athletic coaches, pack leaders, police officers, and parents as partners in supporting our community and simply being available to one another. And whereas local organizations like Suicide Prevention Services and national organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness are in the front lines of a battle that may still refuse to discuss in public, as suicide and mental illness remain too taboo a topic to speak on. And whereas every member of our community should understand that throughout life's struggles, we all need the occasional reminder that we are all silently fighting our own battles. And whereas we encourage all residents to take the time to inquire as to the well-being of their family, friends, and neighbors over the next few days, and to genuinely convey their appreciation for their existence by any gesture they deem appropriate. A simple phone call, message, handshake, or a hug can go a long way towards helping someone realize that suicide is not the answer. Now, therefore, the City Council of University City in the state of Missouri do hereby proclaim the month of September 2018 as National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month in the city of University City. Whereas we have heretofore set our hands and caused the seal of the City of University City to be affixed on this 10th day of September in the year 2018. The next proclamation is a proclamation honoring Alvin Henry. Is he present? Okay. Whereas Alvin Henry will be honored by friends and family on the occasion of his 85th birthday on September 13th, 2018, and whereas in 1953, Alvin Henry married his grade school sweetheart Geraldine, and they raised 6 children together who were educated in the University City school system, and whereas Alvin Henry is a loving grandfather and a great father, and whereas Alvin Henry enlisted in the U.S. Air Force in 1953, served in the Korean War area of operations, where he received several medals of decorations, and whereas Alvin Henry was honorably released from active duty on February 2nd, 1957, and then went on to serve in the reserves until his honorable discharge in 1961. And whereas Alvin Henry has been a proud resident of University City for over 45 years, And whereas during his long and productive lifetime, Alvin Henry has earned the respect and admiration of his family, friends, and people from all walks of life. Now therefore, the City Council of University City in the state of Missouri extends to Alvin Henry our sincere congratulations and best wishes for happy birthday. Whereas we have heretofore set our hands and caused the seal of the City of University City to be affixed this 10th day of September in the year 2018. And the final proclamation this evening is for Mr. Maurice Bell. Is he here to receive this proclamation? No? Okay. Whereas Maurice Bell was born in Missouri on October 28, 1926, and raised in St. Louis, and whereas Maurice Bell joined the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity in 1946 as a member of the St. Louis Alumni Chapter, where he held the office of Excelsior and organized the first Gospel Fest. Under his leadership, the Gospel Fest became a highly successful fundraiser for the fraternity. And whereas Maurice Bell's career as an educator in the St. Louis Public School District spanned 40 years of service, his intellect, creativity, and dedication enabled him to provide leadership in a variety of roles: teacher, reading specialist, and principal. As a school principal, he personally welcomed every student on the first day of school and had an open-door policy for everyone. And whereas Maurice Bell attends the St. James AME Church in St. Louis, he held positions of superintendent of the Sunday school and church trustee. He founded the first aid care team at St. James to monitor blood pressure for members of the congregation. And whereas Maurice Bell has been a resident of University City for 54 years, and whereas he has lived a life of service to the community, including coaching Little League baseball, and eventually held the position of the president of the University City Baseball Corey League from 1973 to 78. He worked tirelessly at being a great role model for youth. And whereas Maurice Bell continues to give back to the community as demonstrated by helping to register voters on the National Voter Registration Day in 2017. And whereas Maurice Bell used his talents to bless others through his art. He is an accomplished artist, and his work has been displayed in several art shows. He finds joy in having his paintings displayed in private households where people can enjoy them. And whereas on September 23rd at Centennial Commons, Maurice Bell will be honored and celebrated by family and friends with the showing of his paintings, which demonstrates that he is still living life to the fullest at 91 years young. Now, therefore, the City Council of University City in the state of Missouri join with the family in honoring and celebrating Maurice Bell for his contributions to the citizens of the greater community. We recognize and respect the senior citizens and the valuable role they play in defining this great community. Whereas we have heretofore set our hands and caused the seal of the City of University City to be affixed this 10th day of September in the year 2018. I'd like to take a look at the minutes. Is there an approval for the August 27 minutes? Councilmember Cusick, a second. Councilmember McMahon. Discussion. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay. The approval of the minutes from August 27th is passed. Let's see. I'm sorry. We have appointments to boards and commissions. And the first is a nomination by our city manager, Mr. Rose.
Mayor Pro Tem Carr, if you recall, at your last council meeting, we reviewed the traffic commission ordinances and determined that the makeup of the traffic commission actually included non-voting staff members. Based upon that, I reached out to both Chief Hampton as well as our Public Works Director, who normally attend those meetings. Based upon, so I am recommending Detective Lieutenant Sean Whitley for the Police Department and Sean Appleson, our Public Works Director for Public Works.
May I have a motion to nominate? Councilmember Hales moves, Councilmember Smothers seconds. Is there any discussion? those in agreement, say aye. Opposed? The approval for appointment of Lieutenant Sean Whitley and Sina Alpaslan to the Traffic Commission. I would like to nominate Liz Essman, a young and new resident to University City, who has great background and experience in green practices, to the Green Practices Commission. It is to replace Ms. Kathy Stratman's expired term. May I have a second? Councilmember Cusick seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The appointment of Liz Essman carries. Is there any swearing in to boards and commissions? We have Mr. Reed present. Okay. So Mr. Reed will be sworn into the Senior Commission by our city clerk.
Paul Reed,
Do solemnly swear
that I possess
that I possess all the qualifications and am not subject to any of the disqualifications named in the charter for the office I am about to assume.
do solemnly swear that I possess all the qualifications and am not subject to any of the disqualifications named in the charter for the office I'm about to assume.
That I will support the Constitution and the laws of the United States and of the state of Missouri and the charter and ordinances of University City.
That I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States and the state of Missouri and the charter and ordinances of the city of University City.
And that I will faithfully and conscientiously discharge the duties of the office I am about to assume with impartiality and justice.
And that I will faithfully and conscientiously discharge the duties of the office I am about to assume with impartiality and justice.
Thank you. The citizen participation section is now open. I'd like to remind the speakers to please give their name and address, and they are limited to 5 minutes total. The first speaker is Jan Adams.
Jan Adams, 7150 Cambridge Avenue. I rise to present some institutional memory based on my service as a member of the Civil Service Board, and to inform the new members of council and to remind the senior members of council of the costs to the city as a result of the wrongful hiring and firing of city employees during the previous tenure of our recently rehired Director of Human Resources. I understand that it is the city's manager's prerogative to hire his directors and that it is his responsibility to oversee their performance. However, the duty to be prudent stewards of our taxpayer funds is squarely on the shoulders of each council member. The buck stops with you. Because I have only 5 minutes for this comment, I will present just a brief summary of the more impactful events that I became aware of in my capacity as a Civil Service Board member. These events were all recorded and made a part of the presentation to the state auditor back in 2008 and 2009, so there are public records to support my assertions. Also, because Paulette and Carr and I worked together to compile the information that was presented to the state auditor, she should have an independent recall of these events. Number one, the most egregious event occurred when the director fired an employee and then hired her sister to fill that position, a clear case of illegal nepotism. The most costly event was when she fired an employee who filed a lawsuit against the city, but then failed to notify our insurance carrier. As a result, the city had to pay over $300,000 for that settlement. This appeared to be an intentional in order to avoid litigation that would have exposed certain egregious acts and omissions. Another employee's case was settled for $325,000. There was insurance coverage for this claim, and the deductible was only $15,000 at that time. But these settlements contributed to the cause for the increase in our current deductible, which is now at least $150,000. This director also fired an employee who had 34 years of service with the city and was only 2 years from retirement. At the Civil Service Board appeal that I adjudicated, that employee testified that he had attended a meeting with other city employees who were complaining of the heavy-handed management by this director, that the director crashed the meeting and there was a heated confrontation. The employee called the police to have her removed. The Civil Service Board recommended that termination be reversed. The city manager agreed, and there was a $65,000 settlement, and that employee was reinstated for pension purposes. This director also gave her ex-husband an increase in classification and a raise at the time when her child support payments were set as a percentage of his income, in direct violation of our employee rules and regulations. The director's ex-husband has also been rehired, so the opportunity for a repeat offense is still present. Some of the settlements paid during the director's prior tenure were off the books because they were not approved by the City Council under the Adams Fire Administration, which was a common practice of that administration, and were also the subject of the state audit in 2009. Those settlements were not properly reported in the city's accounting records, but simply lumped into the category of, quote, legal fees, end quote. I have just received, pursuant to a sunshine request, for all settlement agreements from 2005 to the present, and there were no agreements produced before 2015. So what has happened to those public records? Finally, before I was appointed to the board, the director was responsible for scheduling quarterly meetings for the Civil Service Board, creating the minutes of the meetings, and submitting an annual report. She failed to meet any of those requirements. She also failed to submit proposed changes in classifications and compensation to the board for recommendation to the council, in violation of our charter. Consequently, the board, under Chairman Jerry Griman, elected me to be the secretary for the board so that the various rules and procedures were then followed. I urge each of you to be diligent in overseeing our current Human Resources Department and any employment litigation and settlements in order to preserve our taxpayer funds. Thank you, and I want to submit my written comments and ask that they be attached to the minutes. Thank you.
The next speaker, thank you, is Eleanor Jennings. And I apologize for the sound, but I can't silence my phone. Eleanor Jennings, 7055 Forsyth. Eleanor Jennings, 7055 Forsyth. I wish to thank Mr. Rose, McMahon, and Hales for helping me get rid of some trash along Forsyth. As you all know, I'm the first to jump up and down and yell and scream. And when I did, I called up Washington U. Washington U told me that they were not going to be able to help me at all. So then I thought, hey, I know who to get a hold of. And I really want to thank the three of you. All I know is I'm not sure who said what to whom, but I went down the street a couple of days later and the mattresses were all gone and the trash was all gone. and it was really nice. So I want to thank you publicly for helping me out. I also would like to bring up something that Mr. Smotherson brought up a couple months ago about putting together a neighborhood manners book. I'm not sure if that was technically what he called it, but I think that might be something that you all might think about. I know there's an expense involved, but I just think it might be something to think about. Thank you. I don't have any more requests to speak at this time, so we will now move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval? Councilmember Hales, second. Councilmember Cusick, any discussion? Hearing
Yes,
none.
ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Councilmember
sorry.
Smotherson.
Just a quick question. What I wanted to find out about the community development block grant. Just making sure that is that the grant that's going to pave Kennedy Avenue? And is that what that is? I just wanted to clarify and make sure I understood what the block grant was for. It was going to be used for.
Pro Tem, Councilmember Smotherson, I'm not sure it's been identified. I'd ask Tina and Ceylon if it's related to your department to present the item.
Councilmember Smotherson, this CBG fund this year was awarded from previous year, and 103,000 was designated to the assistant or forgivable loan to low income. Because St. Louis County fiscal year is calendar year. So the one that you just approved recently going to be used for next year. The fund will be available beginning of 2019. But the one that you're going to sign tonight is from last year. They just want to confirm that the project that we submit has not been changed so that they can start distributed money.
Okay, but I do remember community development block grant being assigned for Kennedy Avenue, if I'm not correct.
That's correct.
So you're stating that that's going to be the next year? Okay.
Yes, sir.
I just thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
City Manager Rose.
Mayor Pro Tem, I have
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Clay.
Yes. So I was looking at page J116. But it does indicate it's it is in the form of forgivable loans. This is a new program, or this is a continuation, correct?
This is the existing program, but each year when we have the public hearing, we have ability or to hear from the citizen. And if there's no citizen submit any project, we can allocate between, in the past we allocate between 3 departments. Police department for overtime, public works department for certain ADA, street and sidewalk, and community development for programs just like low income citizen. If they meet the threshold that St. Louis County set up, in the past we used to give $5,000 for each citizen with the under the agreement that they can rehab their house or do something. But this year, there are certain numbers of citizens who lost their home because of the property tax unpaid for 3 years. So we can use the money for that type of loan to give it to them so that can pay St. Louis County and get their home back.
It's okay, and I'm just curious about, because this idea for forgivable loans is something that we've heard citizens, particularly the third ward, TIF revenue before, so there is a real appetite for this. I know these dollars are very small, so there's not a lot to do on, but I'm just curious about how many people have took participate in this last year.
Well, right now, we do have over 30 people on the account that still have outstanding loan. So the impairment or, forgivable, it's very, very small.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right.
But there's certain restriction that St. Louis County has to go through.
Hearing no other requests for discussion, all those in favor? Please say aye. And opposed? The consent agenda passes unanimously. We now move on to the city manager's report and the contract to demolish the Gables Tea Room. Mr.
Mayor Pro Tem Carr, council members, this agenda item asks council to consider a proposal for the demolition of the tea house. I'm recommending that a contract be awarded to Z&L Wrecking Company in the amount of $18,500 for demolition of the building and removal of the sculptures from the site at Olive Midland intersection northwest corner at 7315 Olive Boulevard. Staff, do you have any additional comments? No other comments at this time?
Okay, I do have two requests to speak, so I'd like to, with your approval, I'd like to hear from the citizens. Christine Mackey-Ross.
Good evening, I'm Christine Mackey-Ross. I reside at 21 Princeton here in University City. I am speaking as a private citizen, although for the record I am a member of the Historic Preservation Council. This came to the council last week or last month, I don't remember the date of the meeting. And at that same meeting there was another private citizen who presented a proposal and asked for the commission to give him some period of time in order to see if he could obtain funding for his proposal. The committee approved that, making a request to the city that they abate any decision on that for 90 days until the gentleman could see if he could indeed get funding for such a project. So I realize I'm probably asking this with incomplete information about what the city's idea is for the entirety of that plot of land, but I did at least want to acknowledge that this gentleman had an idea, and I wanted him to at least have the opportunity to present that idea to council. I have one other announcement. Paulette, would you like me to make that now or after the next period?
Does it have something to do with
It
this?
does not.
Okay, so if you can hold
I
on.
would be happy to. Thank you for the ability to speak.
And Travis Booth.
Travis Good of 5889 Clemens. You guys already know me. I've come over twice already now. I want to kind of get some understanding of what's going on because I was told by the mayor to talk to Mr. Rose. Mr. Rose told me to talk to Salon. I talked to Salon. I was invited to the historical committee meeting. I went to that meeting. In that meeting, all the members of the historical committee agreed to the 90-day extension. And I followed through to ask more questions about it. Once on that meeting, I talked to other people, kind of gave me the runaround and feel comfortable with what's going on. So I talked to Mr. Rose, also in an email I received from him, stating that he was requesting that I can read it here for a second here. He said that he asked for me to provide a letter forward regarding the proposed development. I was never once told to do that by Mr. Gregory Rose at all. And I know even if I was to get this property and do the development and everything else, I have to work with the city. And that's evident. I know I have to do that. The proposal was for 90 days, and I've only had 30 days to get everything together. We got a tentative plan together for that, and we're eager to get everything going, but then I found out that the building's being voted on tonight, and it was kind of like I had to rush off of work to get here to talk to, everybody to talk to. I mean, I had Councilman Cusick was there, you know, Councilman Paulette was there, a few other members were all there, and I just want to know some understanding what's going on. I even reached out to Mr. Wayne Smotherson on Facebook, and he told me that, you know, you guys have already voted, which I don't understand that either. He said you already voted to demolish the building already, which is kind of contradicting the story now. And he said, why not move up the streets of Billville while the other place? And then I went to that place, and they said that was already sold. So I just want to get a clarification of what is available. If you guys want to just sell the land, we'll buy it. We'll pay the $19,000 that you're paying for demolishment. We'll take care of all of that. We just want to keep a piece of the history around. If you guys don't want to destroy the entire building, we want to take a portion of the building and actually build all of the building. So please let me know what information you give me. I mean, we're willing to pay the money. That's not the problem. We just want to know if the land is available for sale. That's all I have.
Thank you. So do I hear a motion to approve the tea room demolition contract? Councilmember Smotherson. Mr. Greed, you can take your seat right now. Second, Councilmember Clay. All right, discussion.
So, I guess I'm a little unclear. What exactly transpired at the historical commission meeting? Was there some commitment, because it's kind of vaguely alluded to in here, but was there some commitment of time allotted for exploration of other options?
Since Councilmember Cusick was there, may I have him answer it?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember. Yes, they did a presentation to the Historic Preservation Commission, and the commission debated the merits of the building and whether or not it would be safe. And it was the consensus of the commission to to ask the council, or there was a recommendation for a 90-day moratorium before the council would do anything, and then that was their recommendation. And that was, I believe, the extent of it.
Councilmember Smotherson.
Well, I just simply wanted to say, and just to make sure that we're clear, and again, that the Historic Commission is making a recommendation to us. But what I wanted to let Mr. Travis know is that no, I didn't mean, if I intended to say that we made that vote, the vote is tonight. But what I did want to say is that I'm absolutely interested in what your plans are. But this has been a long-standing issue that we've had in the third ward. It really has. And I think that we as a council should move forward with this vote. But what I will actually say is I look forward to hearing your plans on that lot. And it is absolutely for sale, and that's something that you would address with the city manager and the staff. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, I'm sorry. Steve, Councilmember McMahon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a question, a little bit off topic on what we've already been discussing, but the sculptures, it indicates that we don't know, no one's expressed an interest in recovery or repossession. Do we own them? And if we don't own them, have we tracked down the artists who might later claim that we've disposed of their property in Broadway? I just want to make sure we've got that covered before we move those items off those lots.
City Manager Lewis.
Mayor Pro Tem Carr, Councilmember McMahon, yes, we do own them. I know that Public Works Director Sian Appleson reached out to the Washington University to see if they had an interest in acquiring those pieces of art, and they did not express an interest.
I'm not sure if this clarifies Mr. Good's question, but the request was actually earlier was to demolish the building, and so we had asked the city manager to take a look at what it would cost to demolish the building. When it was brought to the Historic Preservation Commission, it wasn't brought in terms of asking permission. It was in a way kind of informing them. Of course, the council can take their recommendation under advisement, but the council makes the final decision. And I know that Mr. Good has contacted me several times with regard to that. So have we received anything yet? Go ahead.
Yeah, Pro Tem Carter, Mr. Good and I spoke twice on record. The first time was several weeks ago when he was inquiring as it relates to what kind of how the project was moving forward and his interest in potentially developing. I shared with Mr. Good at that time the direction that I received from the mayor and council as far as moving forward with identifying the cost of demolition. Asked that if he had an interest in developing or had a proposal, please submit that proposal to me, which I did not receive. The next conversation, briefly, that I had was via email, and that conversation centered on a discussion that he had with some of the council members, and I once again reiterated the direction that I had, as well as informed Mr. Good that the Historic Preservation Commission was acting more in an advisory role in this instance. So with the convoluting of this issue, even though it falls within the authority of the city manager to move forward on it, I felt it best to bring it back to the mayor and council for a final decision on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Hales? No further discussion. Thank you. There's no further discussion. I'd like to take a vote. All those in favor of the contract, accepting the contract to demolish the Gables Tea Room, please say aye. Opposed? The motion carries, and we will award the contract to Z&L Review. We're now moving on to unfinished business, Bill 9364. Ms. Reese, will you please give us a second reading?
An ordinance amending Chapter 505 of the University City Municipal Code relating to streets, sidewalks, and public places, trees, and shrubs, by enacting therein a new section to be known as Section 505.015, Establishment of Honorary Streets.
And the third reading, Ms. Reese?
An ordinance amending Chapter 505 of the University City Municipal Code relating to streets, sidewalks, and public places, trees, and shrubs, by enacting therein a new section to be known as Section 505.015, Establishment of Honorary Streets.
Do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Smotherson, second. Councilmember Clay. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Smotherson?
I just want to quickly say that I'm hoping this council does consider voting for this with the understanding that when a sign is established, it is going to be the opposite color of the sign that we have on the street now. I do also want to understand and recognize the fact that it is something that the police and fire department may not be in favor of, and in fact our city manager may not be. But I think also that it's with the work that we put into it, the work that the Traffic Commission has put into it, the work that Ms. Pettiford has put into this, that I think it's something that won't significantly affect anything in reference to having that street mislabeled or misidentified. Because again, it's Paramount just runs, it's a two-way street with 27 households that is rarely used other than the residents that live on that street and the church participants that use that street to go park. So again, I would hope that this council does vote in favor of this honorary sign ordinance.
Councilmember Clay.
And I would offer this, dais take the concerns of our police and fire and our first responders seriously as it relates to public safety. It's my understanding, City Manager Rose, we did not get anything back indicating that it was an issue in terms of public safety within the city. Is that, I want to make sure I'm correct on that.
Mayor Tim Carter, Councilmember Clay, that is correct. We have not received any information back.
Okay, and the request went out because I saw some exchange. It seemed like there was the responsibilities from the fire department seemed to indicate they were somewhat neutral too. It didn't seem like they had a strong opinion either way, so if I'm reading things correctly.
Councilmember Clay, I believe that certainly there is a concern regarding the potential impact that it can have on response times. What I have shared with and what they agree is that for one street, would it really make a huge difference? No, but 1,000 streets, a significant difference.
And it's my understanding that the number of requests with anyone's recent memory has been 2, and those came just kind of serendipitously within the same 6-month period or something kind of extraordinary like that. But prior to that, there was none.
Mayor Pro Tem Carter, Councilmember Clay, you're correct. I don't believe that we have seen a significant number of requests for honorary streets.
And again, just so we're clear, each one will be evaluated, and within that process, I don't know if it's baked in or not, but some sort of evaluation of police and fire is baked into that process. So if someone wanted to, there's 1,000 reasons why you couldn't choose Del Mar, but let's say someone did want to choose a section of Del Mar, clearly there would be issues associated with that, given the volume of traffic and other things, and so that would likely be rejected based on the merits of policy.
Mayor Pro Tem Carter, Councilmember Clay, my intention would be to bring all of these, if we do receive requests in the future, to have those evaluated by the Traffic Commission with a recommendation to the Mayor and Council, that all of them will come forward to the Mayor and Council for findings.
I'd like to call Mildred Pettiford to make her statement, and then I'd like to ask if the city attorney can
Thank you. With regards to the ordinance that is going to be voted on tonight, I had questions about directions in terms of some of the requirements that are listed in the ordinance. And some of them have already been done through the Traffic Commission, and Mr. Hills and Mr. Smotherson is familiar with that. I'm just wanting to know, do I have to go back and reinvent the wheel with regards to some of the signatures that have already been collected, with regards to basically, with regards to the signatures, and do I go to Mr. Rose or Mr. Sinan in terms of getting the cost for the installation? Because that's another item that was listed. Needed, who do I go to obtain the length of the street and the cost for the signs? And more importantly, the ordinance requires 75% signatures be collected of those 27 affected homeowners. That petition is titled Street Name Change, not honorary street name. So again, do I go back and start collecting signature, or will you honor the signatures, albeit it states name change, which we vacated that idea and went to the honorary street name.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
I'll actually is an ordinance. And so we're not voting on whether or not there should be an honorary street name for Paramount, but whether there should be the option to have an honorary street's name. So, would be all right if we call that.
Mr. Mulligan, would you say?
With respect to the way these questions, the way the ordinance is drafted, there are basically two ways you can establish an honorary street. One would be by ordinance initiated by a council member. Council member requests a bill to be introduced as establishing whatever street is desired to be established as an honorary street specified in that ordinance. The other would be to refer the application, and that would be done administratively in the first instance. So in other words, if Ms. Bedford would like to proceed with this, assuming council passes this bill, she would make an application, and the application must include the information listed in this bill, section B, and then that would be reviewed by staff and presented to the Traffic Commission for recommendation. And then it would come back to the City Council. It may come back to the City Council in the form of an ordinance to establish an honorary street. While not identical to the residential street parking program, it would be similar in the sense that you're looking at one particular location and voting on that by way of legislation. With respect to her question about whether the signature sheet has gathered thus far could be used in the event that the bill is passed tonight for purposes of compliance with Section B, that would really be up to the council to decide. Certainly, if the council is satisfied that 75% of, in excess of 75% of the parcels have consented to this, the council may very well decide that it's not necessary that these signatures be dated after the passage of the bill, because ultimately you're going to pass an ordinance establishing it, which you could do notwithstanding any administrative process involved. So to the extent that there's a defect, if you will, in this, the council could cure that by passing the ordinance establishing the street. If that makes sense. And so what this does is it allows basically the council on its own to establish an honorary street by way of an ordinance, and to bypass this process, or it can say that any street, that it would not consider establishing an honorary street unless this process is followed. And of course, that's always the council's prerogative. You can always pass an ordinance establishing an honorary street or establishing a residential parking area or the like. Secondly, this applies not only to individuals but groups, so that if there's a group that comes forward and would ask that there be an honorary street established in this thing, again, the same process would be followed. So tonight, the council is simply voting on whether or not to establish the authority to proceed in this fashion. That is, for people to submit an application and for that application to then be presented to the Traffic Commission for a recommendation that would be made to the council, and then it would depend on whether two council members wanted to put a particular bill on the agenda for a vote by the council on whether or not that particular street in that application should be approved by way of the establishment of the street.
Would the council be able to do the same? Would they be able to designate a street an honorary street for someone?
Sure. Under this bill, you could do that. You could basically not require that an application be made and that the traffic commission review it. And it's the council's prerogative.
So then, and it's probably the least of any of my questions, but what is the criteria for designating a street? Is it just the wish of a person or a group to designate a street as honorary? Or are there some criteria for meeting that in this bill?
So as far as the physical characteristics of the street, that's specified. It's the location, the length, and bounding streets, and any other boundaries, number of parcels, real estate affected, the number of uses, residential, commercial, industrial that are affected. You have the proposed honorary street name. And then the reason for the designation and the biography of the individual group to be honored. So really, these are calls that the council would ultimately make, decisions the council would ultimately make as to whether or not there is sufficient merit to the application in order to establish it. And so beyond the factors listed here, it's really up to the council to decide. And I suppose if the council wanted to have additional qualifications, that certainly it could specify in the particular bill. And it may change, from council to council. Different members have different thoughts on the merits of particular applications or individuals, what they're looking for in order to establish an honorary street. So right now it's broad, and it could be narrowed if you'd like. I guess we just need to know what additional qualifications the council will be looking for.
Thank you. I have one more question that's related to our public safety. So, so is there anyone here to speak to the issues that they feel that something like this would cause?
Mayor Pro Tem, if it pleases the council, I would ask for both Chief Hampton as well as Chief Ensign to come to the podium to address the impact that honorary streets could potentially have on public safety.
Good evening. We as New City Police Department, we always want to support our stakeholders and citizens in whatever endeavors we have here in the community. But all I can speak on as the Chief of Police is the challenges that we will face for street name changes in general. I understand the difference in the actual change and the honorary. And in the city, the honorary is a street sign hung lower than the actual street sign. The initial and the original street name. That would still, if we're getting calls on 911 reporting one name of the other, in the CAD system for public safety, for fire and police and EMS, it depends on what that particular person is reporting to the communications division. So basically, if we're not putting that name in the CAD system, then that's one thing. So basically, it would be on the knowledge of the experience of the personnel that's taking that call and handling that call to know that that's one and the same of the street that we want to go to. And the response time could be delays if that confusion or delay is confusing to that officer, to the personnel, and that's just an opinion that the police department said.
Good evening, and thank you. From the fire department's perspective, there's 43 different fire departments in the area around us. All rely heavily on mutual aid. When talking to the chiefs in the area, that's one of the things that is their big concern about it is most of the time when there's any call, any fire, any kind of major incident, even a vehicle accident education, a lot of times mutual aid company comes in to assist. The problem with this is a lot of times some of this stuff is called in as people are driving by. If that is a street sign they see, that's what they call it in with. The problem is not us knowing most of the time what the street is, but it's the mutual aid companies coming in. Because the dispatch systems, like you said, are not put in the CAD. They're also not put in Google Maps or any of the electronic mapping systems that are used by fire departments, police departments that are coming to assist you. So today I took a few of these honorary signs from St. Louis City, 10 or 12 of them, typed them in. Can't be found, can't be found, can't be found. That's all the mapping systems say that are on the computers, on the internet, is that they can't be found. One of the things we talked about, like he said, 1 or 2 streets, that's manageable. When St. Louis City started their program, like back in 2001, there were 5 streets. By 2008, they were averaging 12 streets a year. 2009, 16 streets, and in 2010, they were up to an average of 26 streets a year asking for this. In 2010, it was a cost of $10,000 to the city. I think they're upwards now of $300,000 between maintenance, repair on these street signs, these honorary signs. Now, again, if you're talking about a street here in the University City like Yale, street sign's this big. You put somebody's name on an honorary street sign that's this big. That's what people see. I think a more appropriate naming would be an honorary street banner. You know, like you see attached to the street signs, street lights, street signs, like they do in neighborhoods that would have this honorary name for the street on there. Street signs, again, can be pretty confusing. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion? Councilmember Hayes.
If I may, I actually have a question that I think might be applicable to both police, fire, and Mr. Alvarez.
Chiefs, would you return to the podium as well as Public Works Director?
I don't know that both people want to answer this. But I'm sure you both know quite well these 2 streets. So last week I drove this neighborhood again, and so essentially you've got Paramount and Montreal that are east-west. Yeah. Right. And then, so then there's a road that kind of connects the 2 that is on the side yard of the residences that essentially fronts the church. What is the name of that north-south section of the road that connects Paramount to Montreal? Not putting you on the spot.
Not putting me on the spot, but I don't know the name, but I can tell you there's no actual residents on that street.
Right.
So basically, there would have to be an incident, and then the communications division will actually know which particular street that is. It's a very small street, literally less than maybe 25 feet. But it connects those 2 streets itself. So it's basically, I'm not saying that we don't know the name but it's not a particular name that's normally in a police report or that we're responding to. Because lots of times, even at that street right there, they will give us the identification of the church.
Right. So, and I had to pull it up on Google Maps because that was one of the questions I had when I drove through there. I wasn't quite sure exactly what that street was. And if you zoom really far in on Google Maps says it's Montreal Drive. I don't know if we necessarily know that, if that's correct or not. So my question is, since, and I've got concerns about, I share a lot of the concerns that were raised here, but that portion, north-south portion of what may be Montreal
Gabriel Drive fronts the majority of the church. And there are no addresses on that street. So would that be more suitable? And I'm not necessarily thinking in terms of an honorary street name as much as renaming that street. There's nothing on it.
Again, honorable street names are not put into any mapping program or, like you said, into the CAD system. If the name is legally changed, then it would be in all of the systems as such.
And so,
That, but I don't know how, what that entails.
okay. Okay, that's all of my questions for staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I do have a little bit more. I just want to keep them up here. One of the things that the fire chief mentioned was on my notes, and that is the size of the sign. And I think that one of my biggest problems with this ordinance as it is presented is that there are no proportional standards. I know that with Councilman Smotherson's father's street, what is the main street? Walton. So Walton is on a very large sign, and proportionately, the honorary street name is on a much smaller sign. So the street name currently on Paramount is a pretty standard residential street name, street sign size sign, and I think that the fire chief is absolutely right. If you've got a sign that is the Reverend and it's very long, that's going to be the bigger sign, and that really, I think, has a strong likelihood of being noticed. So I think part of this has to, if we were to, I'd like to see that codified somehow in the ordinance. I'm really not comfortable not addressing that point because I think he raised a very, very good point. Separately, with regard to the traffic commission, when I was on the commission, I said repeatedly, I don't really think that honorary street names is something for the traffic commission to take up. I would defer to the commission now on what they think if this were to move forward. But personally, I would like to look at considering either whether the designation of the honorary street name or a full change to that north-south portion, which in our packet it's the road that's kind of hard to see, but it connects the red line down to Montreal. That to me seems like a much better option on many different levels to consider a major policy change on, since there's no property with that address.
Any further discussion?
Just one quick question in reference to Councilman Hale's point, and that is, with this bill can be passed, and it doesn't necessarily have to contain those specifics, but once we accept the application and submit a bill to the council specifically honoring that street, then we can put the specifications of the sign in that bill. And I just wanted to make sure if that's okay, if that's correct in my understanding, because this is just, this ordinance is just to allow for honorary signs. And again, I just want to make sure I'm clear about this. And once we have an accepted bill, then in that ordinance, and once we have an accepted application, we can then specify size for each situation in this case.
Well, I would actually disagree with Mr. Smotherson on this. This establishes the whole process, and while I think staff could administratively set some type of standard, unless that is codified in the ordinance directly related to the proportions of the size of the actual street sign versus the size of the honorary street name sign, then there is no certainty that will be followed in perpetuity. And I think it's really important. I think it has to be in here. And I actually would propose that we not consider this until that
motion to that effect?
I will, if there's not any further discussion in response to my comment.
Councilmember Clayton.
Well, you could manifest what Councilmember Hales is proposing in the application itself. You could put a provision in the application that speaks to a proportional process being applied, or proportionality being applied. It could reside there.
If it's not codified, it's not policy. It can be administrative policy, but that's not at all perpetual. So I do agree it could. I think it should, but it also should be in the ordinance if the ordinance is to go forward.
Did you want to make a motion?
Sure. I would like to make a motion that we delay consideration of this ordinance until it can be amended to include a sign proportion standard for the street sign to the honorary street sign, so that can be added to the bill.
Any second? Councilmember Cusick seconds. Any discussion?
If we're going to go back and amend it, I think then we've got, we're talking about, size of the sign, and are we going to codify the placement of the sign on the pole? Then, if we start to get into that, we have to look and see if there's already any regulations on signage. What is DOT? What are the regulations we've already got that we have to make sure they compare with it? So it's going to be a little more than just, is it the proportionality? I think it's got to be a little more detailed because we're starting to, it's not just going to be these streets. So if it's a street sometime in the future that there's an overlap and it crosses, a county road, and now we've got issues with that. It's starting to, we're starting to get into the weeds about this, and I don't think it's just not spelled out there. So maybe there has to be a little bit more process beyond just proportionality. I think there may be more things involved.
Councilmember Cusick.
I think I have to agree with Councilmember McMahon. I think the ordinance is too vague. One of the things that I haven't heard in discussion is what will be the criteria for giving someone an honorary street, and who will make that decision. And I did hear that it would be a case-by-case basis that would come to the council, but I would like to see that something a little bit more in writing about that. And then also, who would be paying for these signs, and what would the cost estimate be on these? And I'd like to see a little more information on that.
Councilmember Clayton.
Well, my final point on that, there are things that can be addressed procedurally, to Councilmember McMahon's point. And so, I think there does have to be a balance. What is actually appropriate for procedure?
So there's a motion on the floor to postpone until proportionality. Would you like to consider other factors, or just keep it to proportionality?
I think just keep it.
Okay, to consider proportionality. I'm sorry? Oh, yes, please, Mrs. Pettit. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to recommendation that Mr. Hales made with regards to this street that sits on the side there that does not have a sign there at all. So that's another recommendation to consider. So the question to you, well, you're not over the Traffic Commission anymore, so does the process start from square one that I started back in July 2017 with, if I pursue your recommendation, start with the application to the Traffic Commission to request, it wouldn't be a street name change because there's no name there.
Ms. Pettiford, I think that would best be answered by our city manager instead of Mr. Hales.
What?
Mayor Pro Tem, Ms. Pettiford, it would be my recommendation that you go through the process of not, we would have to evaluate whether there is an existing street name, even though there may not be a sign there. It could have been a street name that was placed when it was subdivided. I don't have an answer there. But if there's not been a sign that has existed for a significant amount of time, and there are no residents or businesses along that street.
There are not, sir.
Then that might be an easier name to change if one exists.
That's what it sounds like to me, Doctor.
But I would recommend let us identify whether there is a street name. It would be unusual for there not to be a street name. And then at least advise you as to what the process would be. If there is a street name there, then you would have to go back to the process of getting the street name changed.
Whom can I find that out from? Because I'd like to present that application at the next Traffic Commission. I'm very familiar with the process and procedure because I've already gone through it.
Mayor Pro Tem Carr, Ms. Pettiford, our Public Works Director, Seaman Applestein, can provide you with all of the documentation that you would need to complete.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hales, did you?
I just wanted to briefly respond if I may. One of the challenging things about this entire process, as Mr. Smotherson can, I'm sure, attest to, is that in looking through, which I think we all did, looking through the code, there does not appear to be a process for a street name change. The most recent, it happened with Sergeant King, Mike King Drive, which I think was a similar situation where there was no addresses on that length of street. Similarly, we're here tonight talking about creating a process for honorary street names. So I would probably say, and the city attorney could make clear that I think if a member of council wanted to propose changing the name of a street, a member of council could propose that. It could go to the Traffic Commission, but I think one of the challenges of the Traffic Commission over the last many months is what is the process here, because it does not happen often. And as Mr. Clay said, it actually came before the commission twice in one meeting.
Mayor Pro Tem Carr, Councilmember, if I could have Public Works Director Seaman Applestein share with us at least what his understanding of the process, and if there is no process that's been outlined in our codes or policies, what actions, what precedents exist, what actions have been taken in the past when these issues emerged?
I actually asked my wife today, because she worked here before, and what that policy, how the policy, the written policy that we examined, that initiated, and her response was that it was actually due to the unfortunate incident of the Harvard Avenue was renamed after Sergeant Mike King, and it never, though it appears, was reflected in the code, and so it was a policy that remained on the books of the department, and it wasn't made a code based policy. And so it did the job, it appears. And I haven't checked the land records on the Harvard Avenue. Harvard Avenue may still exist up here, but this Sergeant McKean Drive is its current street name that we use the sign for. And it may have been that process that initiated this for us once, and so until these recent two requests came to us, we haven't really gone back to it, haven't really revisited it, and so then we got into it once again. As to the short street name, I don't think we have any streets in University City that that don't have names. I don't want to answer it wrong. I kind of recognize, I worked in University City for a while now. I think it's Tamerton Avenue, there between Montreal Drive and Paramount Drive. That's the connecting street. Although there may not be any addresses on it, it may be its name, again, on land records, as Mr. Rose referenced, as for its subdivision and its documents.
Thank you. So we have before us a proposal to postpone, a motion to postpone the consideration of this ordinance until we look at the proportionality, seconded by Councilmember Cusick. Should all those in favor? No, in this case, you have to take a voice vote. So, Ms. Reese, will you please poll the council?
Councilmember McMahon?
Aye.
Councilmember Hales? Councilmember Cusick?
Aye.
Councilmember Swanderson?
Aye.
Councilmember Clay?
Nay.
Council Mayor Pro Tem Carr?
Aye. It looks like the postponement passes. We're moving on to new business, and we have a resolution 2018-13 approving a right-of-way use agreement and settlement with Extenet Systems.
Mayor Pro Tem Carr, I would ask John Mulligan, our city attorney, to present this item.
Thank you. This is a resolution that will approve a right-of-way use agreement with Extenet Systems, which has approximately 7,673 linear feet of telecommunications facilities in public right-of-way, as well as 4 antennas. The resolution has attached to it the proposed agreement. The agreement that was sent in the council packet last week contained typographical errors on page 5 of the agreement that we noticed that and contacted Extenet. As you know, Extenet signed this agreement, and so it sent it over with those typographical errors. We contacted Extenet, and unfortunately, we didn't get the authority to substitute the page until today. So we gave the city council a substitute page 5, basically with respect to section 3.4. The monthly linear foot fee is for December 1st, 2017 through August 31st, 2018. What was same for the monthly antenna fee. The purpose of this is a settlement payment because Extenet Systems, the city contended, was delinquent in paying the linear foot fee and the antenna fee as required under the city's ordinance. So this $19,710 payment is to bring Extenet current through August 31st of 2018. But again, the typographical error said it was a payment through August 31st, 2019. So Extenet approved that, sent it over, and initialed it today. And so we're simply inserting that corrected page, which is part of the official agreement before the council. The agreement itself would allow ExteNet to continue to maintain its telecommunications facilities in the public right-of-way. The city will receive the linear foot payments as provided under the ordinance, which is about $1.98 a linear foot. So this means that going forward, the city can expect to receive $1,266 a month for the linear feet that is currently being used by ExteNet. On the antennas, that's $200 a month, but that will only run through the end of this year because of legislation passed by the Missouri General Assembly. It prohibits antenna fees effective January 1st, 2019. So we'll continue to get the linear foot fees, but the antenna fees, unfortunately, there is a preemption of the ordinance effective January 1st, 2019. However, that legislation passed by the General Assembly expires January 1st, 2021. So the way the agreement's worded is that ExteNet has to pay the $200 a month antenna as allowed by law. So if there's if this bill, if this legislation passed by the General Assembly is not extended, then come January 1st, 2021, we would then be getting the $200 a month per antenna fee. ExteNet would resume payment of that. And of course, the linear foot fee amount was not affected by the recent legislation by the General Assembly, so that will continue through January 1st, 2021, beyond barring legislative change made by the General Assembly. So this is under the code. This agreement may be approved by either ordinance or resolution. It's being presented to you in the form of a resolution tonight, which would take one meeting as opposed to two, typically for an ordinance. And so with that, we have to answer any questions about this. Thank you.
So, do I hear a motion to approve? Councilmember Smotherson, second. Councilmember McMahon, any discussion? All those that are in favor of adopting the resolution, maybe I should have this right. Adopting the resolution approving a rights-of-way agreement and settlement with ExteNet. Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all those opposed? The motion carries and resolution 2018-13 is passed. There are no new bills to consider. And under council reports and business, let's see. Okay, these are the gentle reminders. Councilmember McMahon, you have an appointment to make to Arts and Letters and to the Board of Adjustment. And Councilmember Cusick, you have an appointment to make to Arts and Letters. And Councilmember Clay, you have an appointment to make to Kellogg. And Councilmember Smotherson, you have an appointment to make to the Senior Commission. And Mayor Crow has appointments to Civil Service and the Board of Adjustment. Are there any council liaison reports on boards and commissions? And it looks, your minutes, if there would be in your packet, are there any discussions in business? There's nothing listed. So we come to the next section of citizen participation. Please remember to leave your name and address, and you have 5 minutes. Patricia Washington.
Good evening, Patricia Washington, 7840 Plymouth. After my comments to council on 8/27 regarding Ms. Carr's newsletter and the inclusion of information about my efforts on the CBA for the Island 170 development, Ms. Carr and others made remarks on the record that I would like to address this evening for the record. I would also like to submit some emails and documentation for the record that I would reference in my remarks. In her comments following the last council meeting, Ms. Carr referenced a meeting that she attended with several Curzon members, the mayor, and other council members. And part of that meeting posted on a press release sent by me to the St. Louis American newspaper. I acknowledge that I sent the release at the request of an organizer of a meeting of clergy interested in learning more about a community benefits agreement on Island 170 project. Fact, a letter of support was drafted and approved by those in attendance at that meeting, and I was asked, along with others, to send the letter to the press and other media. Fact, the individual who claimed not to know that there was a press release is copied on all of those emails and actually answered in the affirmative in most of them in terms of sending the letter and the release to media. I realize the politics of the matter and the capitulation as a result, but there is no disputing, Councilman Carr, what I was asked to do. Fact, after I sent the news release to one of the media outlets, there was an email from one of the clergy members, the Scientology representative, expressing some concern. I immediately concurred that the group should not move forward with the remaining of the press strategy if not in agreement. Unfortunately, that individual's email came after I sent the release to the St. Louis American. I did not move forward with sending any other information to any media, and I informed my clergy contact that I had already sent the release to the American, but that I would ask them to retract it, as you will see in the emails that I would enter into the record this evening. Fact, I am submitting for the record the copy of the emails asking me to engage in the media effort and the emails where I concur in aborting the media effort and the email asking that I sent to the American asking them to retract the press release. That another one would be forthcoming. Any statement by any person indicating that I did nothing to get that article retracted simply is not a fact. This is important, Ms. Carr, because you continue to say, as a matter of fact, I quote you as saying, you happen to know that many of the clergy present at the meeting with the mayor asked Ms. Washington not to release it. That is not a fact. After those expressed concern, you also said I never sent anything to the media to try and retract it. As you will see in these emails, that's just not true. This information has continued to be repeated by a member of the Scientology organization who was not at a meeting, not copied on any emails, not present in any of the phone conversations. Unfortunately, the same information by this individual was also sent to the TIF Commission. That letter to the TIF Commission is now posted on the city's website. My reply to that letter and to the TIF Commission is not. Ms. Carr, last meeting you also stated that you said, I can tell you that I asked Mr. Rose, had he been contacted by Ms. Washington with regard to the CBA, and he told me no. Those were your words. In fact, on June 25th, 2018 at 2:34 p.m., I sent an email to Mr. Rose requesting a meeting with him and whatever staff he deemed appropriate to discuss the CBA, and I included the suggested ask that had been put forward.
30 seconds.
I received a reply from Mr. Rose that afternoon declining that meeting. So in fact, that's not true. You also said that I had not reached out to council. That is not true. On at least 3 separate occasions, I reached out to council and had 2, maybe 3 private meetings with both Mr. Clay and Mr. Smotherson, at which they received a detailed briefing with all of the information about the CBA and the asks. So that's simply not true. And I want to be sure that the statements that you made are corrected and for the record. So I'm going to submit the emails documenting everything that I've said to you to be included in the record.
Thank you. And Christine Mackey-Ross.
Hi, once again, Christine Mackey-Ross, 21 Princeton. I just wanted to advise the council and those present in the room that a former University City resident, Henry Biggs of One Yale, has a movie that they did as a project. The name of the movie is Swimming for Ferguson. That movie was actually picked up by Landmark Theaters and is going to be shown at the Tivoli Theater from the 14th of September to the 22nd. The movie is partly about racial division in our city, but also about building stronger communities and bridging those gaps. Our mayor, Terry Crow, is going to actually be introducing that movie at the showing on Tuesday, the 18th. It is in the large auditorium, so it did sell out before on its limited run here. So, and that night has been designated University City Resident Night. So if you attend the movie on the 18th and have a University City, an ID of any kind that indicates your address, you will get $2 off your ticket. So I just wanted to say University Citizen does good, and it's a movie that I've already seen and does really speak to helping communities improve themselves. Thank you.
No further citizen comments. Council comments.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'd like to make 2 announcements of upcoming events for University Citians. On Sunday, September 23rd is the annual U City in Bloom Plein Air art event, and artists will be out in the community doing their painting, and then starting at 5 o'clock, that artwork will be on display at the Heman Park Community Center, and encourage people to come out and look at the artwork, and you can even buy the wonderful artwork. If you live in the area that the artists will be concentrating and you would like to have your home painted or your backyard painted, you can contact U City in Bloom Plein Air Committee and they can arrange that. And then I understand that the University City Historic History Society is going to be hosting an event in these chambers, I believe on Thursday, September the 20th, and that evening they will be lighting the light that's on top of this building. And I see both the fire and police chiefs are out there, and we've purchased these new drones. What about setting those drones up and letting us get some film coverage of the night that they light the beacons on top of this building? And then onto a more serious note, I want to say something about the proclamation that we had earlier about September's National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. In my daily life in the real world, in my job, I run across cases of suicide quite a bit. And one of the lines said that the leading cause of death in people aged 10 to 24, that suicide is the second leading cause of death. And I can tell you that that's probably a pretty accurate statement, and that we as a society need to do everything we can to know what the risks are and the people that would be at risk for that. The New York Times had an article about 3 or 4 weeks ago about a 10-year-old boy in, I think, Colorado that hung himself because he was being bullied at school, and 10-year-olds. And in my own profession, I see this quite a bit, unfortunately, teenagers taking their own lives. So I think those of us that are around young people, that we need to be aware of what those signs are of someone that might be in danger and might be contemplating that. One of the things that the proclamation says is that it needs to be talked about, and I encourage that. And especially if you have someone that you think may be in crisis, look into it and ask them and speak to them and talk to them, because there's nothing wrong with doing that, and we owe it to them. And of course, there are times when something happens and someone chooses to take their life, and no one saw any signs or knew anything. But a lot of times there are signs, and learn what those are, and take a couple of minutes to go to the suicide prevention hotline, website, and learn what some of those signs might be. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councilmember Flynn.
Yes, very quickly, I just wanted to say to Councilman Hales, while I disagree with the postponement of the honorary streets ordinance, I do appreciate the creative thinking in trying to satisfy the specific request of Ms. Pettiford, because she has been certainly very long-suffering in this process. And so I do appreciate the creativity around trying to, in some way, accommodate them, even if we couldn't get it done through the ordinance process this evening.
And before we leave this evening, tomorrow will be the 17th anniversary of 9/11. And 3,000 people, innocent people, lost their lives, and the nation lost its innocence. So if you have a moment tomorrow, please give a thought to all those people and the brave people that went in to clean up and to help those people, and just remember that that sometimes we're better than even you think we can be. And so I'd like a roll call, a motion to go into closed session for, according to RSMO 610.021, legal actions, causes of action, or litigation involving a public governmental body and any confidential or privileged communications between a public governmental body and its representatives and its attorneys, and RSMO 610.021, purchase or sale of real estate by a public governmental body. Have a motion? Councilmember Smotherson, second. Councilmember Cusick. Can we have a roll call vote? Ms. Reese?
Councilmember Hales. Councilmember Kuzic.
Aye.
Councilmember Smotherson. Councilmember Flay. Councilmember McMahon.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Carr.
Aye.